Welcome to video 21 in my series on how to use AnyRail. Now in this video, we're going to actually start constructing easements. Oh boy, that sounds like fun, doesn't it? Now we're going to use several different examples of situations you might run into. So as I mentioned before, I can't show you every possible situation that you might run into while designing your railroad. But I'm going to show you a couple of different examples, and hopefully the information I give you there, you'll be able to use on your railroad design. Now this video is actually a complete redo of a video I did earlier. I got into it and then I realized, wow, there's another way I can do this easement thing, and I really should show it to you. So I just redid some graphics and decided to start from scratch. Now, I want to point out that in my research on easements, and again, I'm not an expert on easements, and hopefully what I'm showing you here is actually useful and correct. But in my research, I discovered there are as many ways to lay out the dimensions of an easement as there are people out there telling you how to do an easement. So let me just add my 2 cents worth here into that whole discussion. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you is some information that I got from Bob Fuller's videos. And let me put that up on the screen here. So here are 3 sites that are useful. The first one over here is the Model Railroader website. The second one is the John Galt Line website. And the third one is a video that Bob Fuller found, and this is Ron's Trains and Things. And Ron has a lot of good videos up there, and I'm just stealing a little bit of his information here, but I recommend that you actually go and look at his video because he explains all of this in much more detail. I'm just hitting on the differences in the way that all 3 sites tell you what your dimensions of your easement is and how they're different. So in each one, we are using a 24-inch radius curve. So if you start over here with the Model Railroader, it says for a 24-inch radius curve that my offset of my constant curve or circular curve, they call it constant curve here, my offset should be 7/16 of an inch. And the length of my easement should be 16 inches. Now we come over here to the John Galt calculator. And again, I have 24-inch radius. I put in 16-inch length to match the Model Railroader. And it comes up with an offset of 0.444 inches. And 0.44 inches is actually really close to 7/16 of an inch. 7/16 of an inch is equal to 0.4375 inches. So it's fairly close there. And then we come over here to Ron's Trains and Things. And he says that the formula for figuring the length of your easement is 60% of your curve radius. So we take 24-inch radius, we multiply it by 60%. So it's 24 times 0.60, and we end up with 14.4 inches. And he also says that the offset of your circular curve to the tangent is 1/64th of the circular curve radius. So with a 24-inch radius, we divide that by 64, and we come up with 0.375 inches, which is 3/8 of an inch or 6/16. So they're all fairly close here except for the length of the easement. But in this instance, you could use each of these different methods and your easement is going to turn out just fine. But my plan for this video is I am just going to use the AnyRail calculator, the built-in easement calculator that AnyRail uses. But you can go back and you can look at any of these and you can use these to do your easements if you want to. But it makes it a little more difficult because what AnyRail wants you to input into their calculator is different than what you see here on the Model Railroader or the John Galt site. So let's go ahead and take a look at some examples of how to put easements into your model railroad design. Okay, so here's our first example. We have 2 pieces of track like this at various angles, and you'll notice I've already marked the end angles of my track. And we've gone over in previous videos how to determine the curvature that you would need to put in a curve between these 2 pieces of track. So we won't go over that here. Now what we want to do is we want to put an easement in here. Now the first thing I'm going to do, because I want to show you about offsets, is I am going to put in a curved piece of track. So that would show you what it would look like without the easements. So we know this is 44.22 degrees, and I've already made up some of these track components, so you don't have to watch me do that. So I'm going to go grab that curve. So here's my curve. I've already set the endpoint angle to match my angle up here. So I'm going to position this piece of track properly. So I'm going to go to center line. I'm going to drag this down here, and then we're going to zoom in on it. And we'll move this up like that. Okay, so I now have this properly placed. Now I want to show you something that I just discovered, and I did not know you could do this. So let me copy this curve and put another one right here. All right, now I have shown you in the past that you can use your up, down, left, right arrow keys to move your piece of track. So there's up, there's down, left, and right. And if you hold down the shift key, it moves it in 1/64th of an inch. But while making this video, I discovered something that I didn't know. Maybe it's common knowledge, but I didn't know about it. But if I use a combination of, say, the left and up, or the down and the right, I can move diagonally, which kind of makes it really easy to help move your track into place. So I'm going to use my left and my up arrow, and watch what happens. It's moving diagonally. This is my down and right arrow. This is my right and up, and my left and down. You can move diagonally. Who knew? Anyway, I thought that was kind of exciting, which speaks volumes about my life. So I'm going to be including that little tip in another video that I'm going to make soon that's called Things I've Learned. And it's all the things that I have learned since I started making the videos about AnyRail. And these are the things that I did not include because I didn't know about them at the time. But anyway, let's get back to Easement. So let's get rid of this guy. And I'm going to reset my drawing. Okay, so we now have our circular curve in here. And let's make that a different color. So now I've got a nice kind of orange line here. Now we know this is 44.22 degrees. So what we want to do here is make an easement track that will go in here. So I'm going to make the left-hand side easement for you. So we'll pull in a piece of track. And I'm going to just stay in the center line mode here because it's just easier when we line things up. And now one thing about when you're building an easement, you have to come up with the end angle. And let me show you that here. When we do the easement dialog box, it's going to ask for the end angle of our easement. Now that's a very important number. So you'll see down here, this is 44.22 degrees. And I've mentioned before that as that end angle increases in size, your easement gets larger and larger. And, you know, somewhere around 30 degrees seems to work for a lot of things. But 30 degrees will not work here. And let me show you why. Now, I've mentioned before that I made up a drawing, easement track length for different end angles and radii. And I have that up on my website, Steam Powered Radio. And you can go look at that if you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a 30-degree end angle easement from that drawing. So here it is. So now we will set its end angle to match this up here. So we'll put in 49.46. And there we go. Now I need another one of these to put over here. So let me copy that. And let me paste that in. Now I'm going to flip this around. This is what you can do with easements. You design one side, you come up here and you say flip. And now you've got the other side of your easement. So let's set this guy's endpoint to match this line down here. Okay. And I'm going to show you why this number is important versus the end angle. So let's drag this down here, and you're probably going to see this almost immediately. Maybe we should go to track for this. Okay. Look what we've got. See, this angle is too great. No matter where I put these two pieces, it's not going to work. Now, this may be obvious to some people, and others it might not have been so obvious, but you know, it's just not going to work. Your train would come down this way, and then you'd have to make a curve back into here, and boy, that's just not what you want to do. So let's lose that. So what that means is the sum of your two end angles on your easements cannot exceed the angle of your curve. In this case, our curve is 44.22. So what I can do here is I can do two different things. I'm going to show you both of them. I'm going to go back to center line. Now, I can take this guy and I can turn him into an easement. And I can say, well, let's make him 20 degrees, because 20 and 20 would be 40. And we want our radius to be 24. And there we go. Now let's copy him and let's paste him over here. Let's flip this one around. Now I'm going to set the end angle of this guy to match this one up here. So 49.46. I said I wasn't going to design these in front of you, but I think I should. And we'll set this end angle to equal this one, so 273. And there we go. Now they will match up. If I bring them down here and put them sort of in place, you'll see that, yep, that's going to work between the two. Now, I don't have to design my easement down here, because I know what the angle of this curve is. It's 44.22 degrees. I know my end angles up here are 20. So put them together, I get 40 degrees. That means I need a circular curve to go in between these two of 4.22 degrees. So let's do that. Grab a piece of track. So let's curve this. And remember, the radius of your curve always has to match the end radius of your easement. So let's see, we need an angle of 4.22 degrees and 24-inch radius. There we go. Now we just come up here and we grab this guy, if we can. We're going to drag him down here. We're going to connect him up. We're going to grab this one, connect him up. Let's turn this into another section so we can give it a different color. Make this one that purple color. And there's our easement. And then we just drag it down like we did with our curve, and we set it in perfectly. So let me set that in the way it should be, and then we'll look at something else. So stand by again. Okay, I'm going to say that looks pretty good. And there's our offset there from our circular curve to our easement curve. Now, another thing I could do is, instead of putting in this little piece of the circular curve right here, I could say, well, let's build an easement that is exactly half of this value. So let's give that a try. Now, I've already built those up, so I'm just going to paste them in here. And now we can take a look at this easement to see what its values are. When you click on a piece of track like this, AnyRail always remembers what that value is, and it puts it in for you. So in this case, it's 22.11, which is half of 44.22. So I know these are right. Now, I've already set the end angles on this. So what I'll do is I'm just going to bring these together, put them together like that. Let's give them another color. And then let's drag this down and align it. All right, now the one we just made is in place. And you'll notice that it almost follows. Let's zoom in on that. And you'll notice it almost follows the easement that we made with the small circular curve in the middle. So now let's have a little bit more fun. Let me reset this drawing. And now I'm going to show you the reason why I redid the original version of this video. Now, these easements look really, really nice. I mean, you could put that on your railroad and it would look really nice. But If we look at the charts that we showed at the very beginning, they all say that the easement length should be somewhere around 16 to 14.5 inches. Now, on the easement we made that had the small circular curve in it, our easement length is 13 and 11/32. And on the one where we put the two easements together, that easement length comes up at 15 1/4 for the length of the track. So that's pretty close to what the charts say. But let's try something like this. Let's make a ruler. And let's set that ruler to, let's say, 16 inches. Now let's set this ruler so we can put it right on this line. So we know that this angle down here is 93.68. So let's rotate this guy. And let's rotate him 3.68 degrees. And we'll drag him down here. And we're going to put him right on the intersection. Now if we move him up like that, you'll see he's just a little bit longer than our easements. Now trust me, this is going somewhere. Now I can zoom in here and I can say, I want my easement to be 16 inches long on this track. I'm going to cut the flex right there. And you can probably see where I'm going with this. Now I'm going to take this guy actually, and I'm going to copy him and put him up here. And I'm going to rotate him again. Okay, now he's horizontal again. And we know this end is 49.46 degrees. So I'm going to subtract that from 90, and I end up with 40.54 degrees. So let's rotate 40.54, but let's make that a negative number. Okay. And we're going to come down here. We're going to drag that just like that. And I'm going to move it. And with my newfound arrow key combination, I should be able to move that away diagonally. Just like that. I'm going to come up here. And I'm going to cut my flex. All right. Now, I'm going to take this piece. I'm going to delete it. And now I'm going to take this endpoint. I'm going to drag it over here and let it connect up to this piece right here. Now I'm going to select that piece that we just moved, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to hit smooth flex. And if I understand what David at AnyRail said, smooth flex creates a spiral curve. So let's see what happens. So there we go. We now have a curve between these 2 points. And if you look down at the bottom, it says the minimum radius is 33 45/64. So that means at the center point right here, my radius is 33 45/64. And then it gets larger and larger and larger until it comes out to my connection points. The same thing that an easement does. Now, yes, the offset is much more. The offset looks like it's maybe a ½ an inch. But putting this in can actually be a lot easier than doing it with the easements. Now, you can still do it the easement way, but this kind of looks nice. I kind of like that. Now, you don't have to do it with the rulers. You can do it by guessing. So let's disconnect this guy. I'm going to move him out of the way. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab the end point of this one. Oops. I'm going to stretch it back out. Come up here. I'm going to grab the end point of this one. And I'm going to stretch it back out. So instead of putting in the rulers, I could have just come in here and said, well, it looks good here. And it looks good. Looks about the same distance, maybe right here. Cut it, delete that section, grab this guy, connect them up, hit smooth flex. What do we got now? Look down at the bottom, we've got a minimum radius of 36 and 15/16 inches. And of course, I could always move these in. If this ran into something else in my layout design, I could always move these endpoints in until I got something that resembles what we did with the easements. As long as my minimum radius doesn't go below what I wanted my curve to be here, I think you're okay. And this might save a lot of time. So the important thing to remember here is, yes, you can design it with easements, and that's going to work just great for you. But you can also cheat by just coming in and cutting your track. Just eyeball it. Just figure, okay, it looks good here, it looks good here. Bend the track over, come up, smooth flex creates a spiral curve, hit smooth flex, and there you go. But like I said, if you've got something in here that you want to protect, buildings or some other kind of scenery element or anything, then you might want to either use the easement method or then just start moving your cut points in. 6 of one, half dozen of the other on this design element. All right, let's go look at another example. Okay, I've been handed a communique by the council and I've been forced to read it. And basically what it says is what I just told you might not be completely accurate. But I am going to say it does work, but I think the council wants me to mention a couple of things here. Now, I said you could take the ruler and put it down here. And that would be like your easement length. Well, that's not exactly correct. This measurement from here to here would be XS on the diagram, as you can see above. And XS starts at the point TS and then heads out to the point SC where we join the circular curve. So basically what I think you should really do is you should make that measurement from SC, which I have pointed out here. And you would put your ruler like that. And then you would cut your flex track here, instead of having the ruler down here where the two tangent tracks connect. But I think it works in both instances. But just to be a little bit more accurate and keep the council off my back, this measurement here is XS, and that should go from SC and then along your tangent track. So I hope that explanation gets me out of trouble, and we'll get back to our video. Thank you for your cooperation and understanding. So here's another situation you might run into while designing your railroad. Now over here we have a 14.84 degree angle, and over here we have a 30.47. So we got a track coming in this way. We want to transition to the straight piece, and then we want to go back out here. Now remember what I said. The endpoint of your easements can't exceed this angle, the angle of your curve. So that means the endpoint of each of my easements would be 7.42 degrees. And that's going to end up with a very, very small easement. So let me bring in examples of those easements. So here they are here, and I've already set their end angles and I've given them a color. So let's take a look at the easement. And I have it set to 7.42 degrees. And the reason I have it set to 7.42 degrees is it's such a small angle that if I set it to say 6 degrees, then I would have to put in a 2.84 degree curve in between them. And that would just be too small to work with. So I actually just made them as half of my curvature here. So I would take them, I'd put them together, and then I'd bring them down, and I'd line them up like that. So let's zoom in on that a little bit here. And that looks okay. But in this instance, what I think I would do is I would do what I showed you in the other video. And I would just come out and I would say, well, let's do like 12 inches. So there's my intersection point. So 12 inches would be right in this area here. And I would just cut the flex. And then I do the same thing here and go, well, that looks like 12 inches. Delete it, drag it up, smooth it. What do I got? I got a curve of 86 and 35/64. And I think that looks so much better than doing an easement that way. Now over here, we could do this with a more traditional type of easement if we wanted. So let's bring those pieces in. And here they are. And on this one, I set the easement to this value. 12 degrees. So put it together, we got 24 degrees between the two pieces of easement, which would mean this piece of track here would have to have a curvature of 6.47 degrees. And that's what I have it set to. So we just put them together. Let's give them a color. And now we have an easement. And we just put it down here. But once again, I could just come up here and I could cut the flex here. I could cut the flex here. And I'm just choosing these points at random. Bring it up. Smooth it. What do I got? I got a 36-inch, almost 37-inch radius at the center point. So once again, it's up to you. You can build the easement the traditional way, or you can use the method of cutting your flex track at random points and then putting in a smooth curve between it. Up to you. Okay, so let's take a look at one more example. Okay, so here's another example. And in this one, we have this acute angle here. For some reason on a railroad, we have that. So here are all of our angles. And we've got 40 degrees on this track, 358 degrees on this track. And we need to put our curve in here. So in order to get the angle of our curve for this one, we're going to take this end angle here, 178 degrees, and we're going to subtract 40 degrees from it. And we're going to end up with 138 degrees. The other way to do it, if you want to take these two ends, is you take 358 degrees, you subtract 180 degrees from it, that gives you 178, then you subtract 40 from it, you end up with 138. Now we know that you can't curve a piece of track more than 90 degrees in AnyRail, which means we're going to have to make two curved tracks of 69 degrees. Now in the other examples, I showed you that you could cut your flex at a random point and then drag the piece over and use smooth flex to create your easement. But it's not going to work here on an acute angle, and let me show you what happens. So let's cut it back here. So we'll cut it there. We'll cut it here. We're going to remove this piece, and now I'm going to drag this piece down. Connect it up, and I'm going to hit smooth flex. And watch what it does. It makes this. And our minimum radius up here is 5 and 23/32. And I think this will be true no matter where you put your cut points on this acute angle. So for this example, we're going to have to actually build easements. So let me reset the drawing. Now let's start with putting in just a circular curve. I'm going to go grab a piece of track, and I'm going to curve it. And we're going to curve it to 69 degrees and 24-inch radius. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste in another copy. I'm going to connect them together. Then I'm going to grab this number down here, 178 degrees, and I'm going to put it into this endpoint here. That flips our track around. And now I'll just align it. That looks pretty good right there. Let's go to center line. That looks nice. All right, now let's build our easement for this end. Now I've mentioned that the total of the end angle of your easements cannot exceed the angle of your curve. In this case, our curve is 138 degrees, and you can only set an easement to a maximum of 60 degrees. So we don't have to worry about that here. But as you go to a larger end angle number, your easement length is going to get longer and longer. And this is where I said 30 degrees seems to work pretty darn good for building easements. So let's make one of 30 degrees. And there we go. We got our first easement. And if we look down below, we'll see that it is only 22 7/64 inches long, the whole easement track. Now, should I go to a higher value? Let's say we wanted to make it 45 degrees. Let's look at that. See? Much longer. Takes up much more room on your railroad. So I'm going to stick with that 30 degree for this demonstration. All right, so I've got this guy. Now I want to copy him. And I'm going to paste in another copy. And I'm going to flip it. And now let's set our end angles. Actually, we don't have to do that yet. All right. And the reason we're not going to do that yet is we're going to do it as one assembly. So we've got 30 degrees on both sides. So that is 60 degrees total. And our curve is 138 degrees. So now we want to subtract 60 from 138. And we end up with 78 degrees. So let's go grab another piece of track. And we're going to curve that to 78 degrees. 24-inch radius. I'm going to take it. I'm going to assemble it. Just like that. Now, I'm going to set this end of the track here to the same angle as this. So that's 178 degrees. So let's set that 178. There's our easement curve. Now we just drag that puppy in, line him up, and there we are. And remember, when you make an easement curve, it always pulls the curve in. Earlier I talked about offset. Offset is something different. It just is going to pull that curve in a little bit. So that's how we go about making an easement curve for an acute angle. So let me bring in one more example here. This is another easement curve I made, only this time the end angle on the easements are 40 degrees. And that makes that track much longer. And as you can see, let me line it up, it pulls in the curve even more. Now it's going to look nicer, but I think unless you have a lot of room for your railroad, you probably want to go with this one that has an end angle of 30 degrees or maybe a little bit less, and just save some room on your railroad. Okay, I have one more example I want to show you, and then I promise that's it, and we'll be done with easements. Okay, so this is our last example, and I promise this will be the last example, but I want to show this one to you because this type of track arrangement would result in an S-curve. So what I did here is I just made this one easy. These two pieces of track are horizontal, and then this piece of track here is at a 45-degree angle. So there's no odd decimal points in any of our angles. This will be real easy to figure out. So to get our curve that comes in here, we would take 135 and we subtract 90 degrees, and we would get 45 degrees of curvature. And it's the same down here, 135 and 90 degrees. So you would take a piece of flex track and you would curve it to 45 degrees and a 24-inch radius. Now I already have done that, so let me bring those two pieces into the drawing here. And here they are. So we'll take these and we will put them up here, and I will align both of them into place. Okay, and there they are. Let me explain what an S-curve is in case you're new to the hobby. I'm going to take those same two pieces and I'm going to put them in again. And this would make an S-curve. So I would take this piece here, I would connect it like that. And this is what's called an S-curve. And that's something you want to avoid because it can cause all sorts of problems with misalignment on couplers and the like when your car hits this S-curve. So you got one car here, then you got the car out here, you got another car out here, and it just poses problems. So you want to avoid S-curves. So let's lose this. And you can look up online and find out more about S-curves, but the general rule is you want to avoid S-curves. So, okay, we have our nice curve in here. We know this is 45 degrees. So now we need to make an easement in and out of this piece of track. So let's start building up our easements. And if the screen looks a little bit different, that is because I made a mistake in the original recording of this video and I had to do it again. So I tried to set it the exact same way. Maybe I got close. Okay, so let's build our easements. Now we're going to make our easements have endpoint angles of 20 degrees. And the reason I'm doing that is because our curve is a 45-degree curve. So two 20-degree easements will give us 40 degrees. And then we'll have to put in a circular curve of 5 degrees in between. So what I'm going to do is I have those pieces made up, just like the curves, and I'm going to go grab those and bring them into the drawing. And here they are. Now, I made the easements just like I made all my other easements. I took a piece of flex, I opened the easement dialog box, put in 20 degrees for the endpoint, and a radius of 24 inches. So now, let's assemble them. This will be the top easement. And I'm going to make that a separate color. And then let's assemble this easement down here. And let's give it a color as well. And to make things a little more clear, let's make these two a separate color. And that allows us to see things a little more clearly, or as clearly as I can explain them. So here's our easement. We're going to drop these into place, so let me do that. And there we go. So now we have two nice 24-inch radius easements coming into our curve and out of, into our straight tangent track, and then back down into this tangent track. All right, now I mentioned S-curves. And we're going to talk about how to avoid them here. Now, if I didn't have this piece of track right here, and this part of the easement here connected to this one, we'd basically have an S-curve. Yes, this is a very broad radius as it comes out of the easement, but it would still constitute an S-curve. And now what I've read and kind of remember from many, many years ago is that between the two curves, you want a piece of straight track that is equal to or greater than the longest car that you will be running. So if you're running passenger trains with long cars, you're going to want this piece of track to be longer than that car. So for this demonstration, I'm going to say that we want this section of track to be somewhere around 15 inches. So what we need is we need to put in a ruler just to make sure that we're okay. So let me go grab one. And this is a ruler I've made up, and I rotated it to be at a 45-degree angle. So let's just pull that up here and let's take a look. And we are real close. We're just a little bit over 15 inches between the end of our easements. So we're okay here. So this easement construction is pretty much done. All you'd have to do now is pull back your tracks and connect them to the end of the easements, and you'd be done. But just like in all the other examples that I showed you, you can do this without using easements. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn off our easements and our curve here so we don't see them. Now I'm going to use this ruler that says 15 inches as my marking point. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say, let's cut the flex right there. And then I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, well, right about there, probably. And I'm going to cut it there. We'll lose that one. We'll drag this down. We'll smooth it. What do we got? We got 30 and 47/64. And let's do the same down here. So we'll cut this one right about there. And I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, well, that looks good right there. Lose that. Drag that. 30 and 47/64. Boy, that's pretty good for guessing. I got them both exactly the same. All right, now let's turn our easements back on. And as you can see, it pulled the curve in a little bit this way, probably less than an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch from our easement curve. But we got a wider radius out of it. So once again, it's up to you how you want to do it. You can build up an easement like this, or you can make this sort of pseudo easement here by using smooth flex. Okay, so I think we're done with easements, at least for right now. Unless I get some comments saying, boy, you don't know what you're talking about and you should have done it like this. Or I have another idea on how to build easements and we changed the video. But for right now, I think we're done. So I apologize for the length of this video. This is a long one, but I think there's a lot of good information in there. So I think with everything that I told you, you'll be able to look at your track plan and put in easements or use that smooth flex method and get some really nice curves. And then that way you won't have that toy train look as your train transitions from a straight track to a curve. So if you think I missed something that should have been gone over, put it in the comments section below and we'll see what we can do about turning out a little video on that. So once again, I thank you for sticking with me and we'll see you in the next video.